Okay, how's everybody feeling? So we're gonna bring some more action here. I'm super excited because this combines so many different domains, and we try to like break the silos and all of that good stuff. So I run an organization called the Digital Economist. We are fairly young, but not quite a startup anymore. We launched at the World Economic Forum in 2020. And our mission is to drive convergence of different technologies towards a human-centered world. And I should expand that by saying life-centered systems. So in this case, of course, other life forms as well. But what are commons, right? And it's important, I think, to get the definitions right, because commons are not the same as public goods. So there are two things that happen. Either you can exclude someone or not, and the other is if the consumption by one person impacts the consumption of the other person, right? So in other words, is there a subtractability that happens of the common pool resource? So you can see, you have public goods there, which are, by the way, taken care by the government through public money, which means taxes, fiscal policy, and that has low subtractability of use. This is the kind of the term that Ostrom uses in her work. And then you have, the pure private goods case where you have the ability to exclude, ownership, private use, etc. Now, there's club goods, right? All sorts of memberships, which are private goods, but could be shared within a certain group. But then the use by one doesn't exclude the use by other. And then you have a very special case, which again Ostrom, along with her co-authors, they clarified, which is common pool resources. Here, it's a unique animal because you cannot exclude others from accessing it. If we consider blockchain as an infrastructure technology, we have to ensure that we understand it and treat it as common pool resource, which is, again, like I said, different from public goods, right? And then, of course, you go into the governance aspects of it, which is how do we actually ensure the resource is protected, right? And I will go on to say even that the fact that a lot of the problems we see in the world are not so much because of there isn't enough resources, it's because we poorly manage our resources. As humans, we've always been governing our resources collectively. And so we have to remember that there are communities around the world that have always been managing our resources as commons, and we, in many ways, that is the best way to do, right? So the wisdom of the crowds is also kind of the reason why here, we see a strong case for managing our resources as commons. Just a few examples. Of course, you have, the lakes, your forests as local commons. You have global commons, right? The outer space, the oceans, beyond, the 10 miles, whatever we have as national jurisdictions. Then you have digital commons as a subset. And here's kind of where what brings us together. That we don't have to reinvent the wheel. The principles exist. The guidelines exist. We have to think about how we apply these, how we bring them into the current context. Perhaps the most beautiful and what we sort of picked as the core of this approach is to have a polycentric system. So there's no one center, right? So different centers, again, have their own governance mechanisms. Then it feeds into the overall approach and the governance of the full common. This is important because it makes governance easier than a centralized, obviously, authority to govern it. Why blockchain governance is a key driver for long-term sustainability. Our premise is the following. The governance of the resource is going to be a key driver for the value of the resource itself. It's intricately tied in. It's one of the core pillars, right? So all of this work sort of comes from this hypothesis. And we argue that actually it's even more important in case of blockchain because, first of all, given the immutable nature, of blockchain technology, it becomes even more important that you want to get it right from the beginning because you can't go back and change it, even though rules, do evolve over time. Then, of course, it's driven by community. There's consensus that, the community has to arrive at in order to move the protocol further. So it's very important that we look at community not just as a side thing or a later thing. And I don't think that's something I have to say to this group here, but a lot of the times, and I've been in this space for 8 years, we haven't seen all of the chains, I think, working on the community in the best possible way that they can. And then finally, incentives. which again, from an economist perspective, we know that people respond to incentives. We know that companies and organizations respond to incentive, and there's a lot of empirical work, 200 years of economic literature. But again, when it comes to the polycentric approach to governance, the blockchain can of course have the risk of being centralized and being overused, and the tragedy of the commons occurring in their case if we don't get the governance right. What I'm sharing with you today has been 2 years in the making. First time we're talking about this publicly, which is something called the Ostrom project. So our kind of vision, it's a little complex sentence, but is to support, protect, and enhance efforts to create a cohesive, sustainable future. And again, digital actions and all the things we do somehow to aggregate, come together, bring it together into an interconnected web, right, of initiatives to contribute to our well-being of the planet and, of course, all life in it. Currently, we're envisioning the Ostrom project to do these three things, which is research in applications of polycentric governance. Governance, again, being the primary driver of ensuring the sustainability of commons over the long term. But to kind of offer this as sort of the equivalent of a policy or best practices repository, which I think will go a long way to help researchers, engineers, and really the wider stakeholder community. And then also, supporting policy making, which is let's mark certain resources to be governed as commons by community and treat it as such. And I think we've seen a lot of that play. We certainly have in Washington, D.C., where there's a lot of, there has been and still continues to be. There is some clarity now by treatment of different, blockchains, digital assets, and sort of what that means as well. Here's my email. Ask how you can get involved, and thank you.